It was the beginning of the end of the world. But hey, at least the weather was nice. It was the middle of December and northern Montana was in the high 40s. It was the only remotely positive thing Kaden Boone could think of at the moment since he was stuck spending his Christmas break with his older brother Logan. He was initially going to spend it being lazy in his nice, warm house in Colorado, just like how many of his other 15-year-old friends would. However, that was no longer the case, since his parents forced him up north to spend time with his 18-year-old college freshman of a brother. It wasn't that Kaden hated his brother, it was just the fact that they were brothers, and Logan was the bigger and stronger of the two. Even though Logan had matured and had grown nicer to his younger brother lately, the prior years filled with teasing helped cultivate a small sense of disdain within Kaden. He tried to leave it all in the past though, because, in the end, he was stuck with him for the next week. Kaden sits on the raggedy sofa in his brother's small, shabby Missoula apartment. The whole living space smelled of dust and despair. It was no wonder that Logan was stuck living within these aged white walls, because the extended family that lived up there moved away last minute. There were books and school supplies scattered about on the worn-out coffee table, dirty dishes piled up in the small kitchen sink, especially since Kaden's arrival. And worst of all, there was a mysterious carpet stain in the corner that had moved into the apartment long before Logan had. Kaden's brother was not one to leave a mess, especially since he had mild OCD, so it was rather odd for him to see the residence in its current state. It didn't matter much to Kaden though, because instead of paying attention to his gross surroundings, he took pleasure in the distractions of his smartphone and the internet. All the while, Logan was packing for some small trip he had planned to Glacier National Park. He went in and out of his small bedroom, adjacent to the similarly small living room, dropping off items at the door like his duffel bag and a boxy black case. One momentary glance at the case made Kaden groan because he knew that within that case was a thick black telescope. Logan was very invested in things like stargazing, all of which Kaden saw as nerdy. Kaden, however, was not like that. He liked watching mindless internet videos and skateboarding. He did also like to read and occasionally sketch, but he would rather not tell or show anyone that side of himself. At least, not anymore. Okay, Logan says, stretching out his arms and running his hands through his long brown hair. I think I got everything. Are you all packed? Kaden, with his loud earbuds fastened within his ears, completely misses the question. Hey! Logan repeats. After Kaden had not responded a second time, Logan steps over to him and flicks one of the earbuds out of his ear. He once again repeats the question. Of course I am! Kaden answers. What do you take me for, some kind of lazy slob? Well, you do have some gnarly bedhead right now, Logan chuckles, gesturing towards his messy entanglement of blonde locks. He skeptically places his hands on the top of his head, awkwardly realizing the truth in his brother's words. Okay, fair enough, Kaden replies, proceeding to comb as much of it down as he could. He takes another brief look at his brother's telescope. It was just sitting there, haunting him. I see you're bringing that with us. We're not going stargazing, are we? We're going stargazing, baby! Logan replies, pumping his fists simultaneously. Come on! Kaden groans. You know I think looking up at the sky is lame, let alone standing around in a stupid forest for hours on end. Trust me, it's gonna be fun. Logan encourages him. The park is absolutely stunning, and thanks to the weather, we're lucky enough to even get in this time of year. Will there be cell service at least? Kaden inquires. Nope, Logan smiles. But that won't be a problem, man, because we'll be able to spend more time with each other. It'll be awesome! Kaden mutters. Yeah, awesome. They pack everything into the trunk of Logan's battered 1990s black sedan. When Logan bought the thing, he didn't exactly have a wide array of options to purchase from, but nevertheless, he insisted that it was his dream car. Kaden thought that his brother's claim was completely preposterous. Not only was that lemon far from being anyone's dream car, but there was a fat chance of anyone's dreams ever coming true. Especially for Kaden, since he was currently stuck in a nightmare. After 10 long and dreadful minutes, the two of them finally finished loading the pitiful vehicle, Logan having done most of the heavy lifting since Kaden was overflowing with apathy. You wanna drive, Cade? Logan inquires as he shuts the trunk, making the whole vehicle jostle around and squeak. You brought your permit, didn't you? Nah, I'm good, he smiles in response. I'll just leave the driving up to the professional, you know? You sure? Logan presses. I heard from Mom that you need to get a little more practice in. And what better way to practice than driving in this sweet ride? He pats the roof of the car, making the passenger side mirror drop and hang down from its duct tape harness. Logan hurries over to fasten the mirror back into place with more duct tape from the glove compartment. Yes, I'm sure, Kaden says. It's not that he didn't want to drive, it was that he was secretly unconfident with his driving. He knew that if his family knew about his insecurities, that would just be more reason for them to make him practice. But no matter how much he practiced, he was always scared of crashing into things. Especially people. Besides, he needed as much time on the internet as he could get before entering the dead zone of their destination. Let's just get going and get this trip over with. As he opens the passenger door and lowers into the seat, he sees Logan look down. Okay, if you say so. With multiple turns of the key, the car takes a solid minute to sputter to life. Logan turns towards Kaden with a smirk on his face. He was really proud of the vehicle, even though all the internals collectively sounded like a dying bore. However, Logan's pride did not attract Kaden's attention. He already had invested it all into his device. Logan's smirk fades and he rolls his eyes disdainfully as he pulls out of the parking lot. As they drive through town to get to the highway, there are several pedestrians out and about enjoying the warm weather and unusual lack of snow. They cross the bridge that overlooks the Clark Fork River, where people are happily paddleboarding and kayaking with wetsuits on. Kaden only caught glimpses of all the bustle, remaining indifferent throughout. Kaden keeps receiving messages from his friends back home about joining them on a video game, but each time is just a reminder of his predicament. He had to decline their offers because all of his gear was back home. Oh, how he longed to be back home, away from Montana and away from Logan. Sure, Logan was being nice now, but Kaden was certain that it was only to look good in front of their parents. Logan was just dragging him up north to the desolate forest mountains to discreetly annoy and torture him. His point was further proven when Logan started playing his boring old country music. Logan glances over at Kaden, who is still sending responses to his friend's messages. Texting your girlfriend over there? He asks. Wouldn't you like to know? Kaden replies. Sheesh, I was just asking, dude, Logan returns. It was at that moment when his own phone started ringing. He turns down the music. Speaking of which, hey babe, how's it going? Kaden cringes. Not only because his brother said babe, but because he was now on the phone with his girlfriend, Hope Sanders. This was not going to be good for Kaden because nothing made him more uncomfortable than romance, especially when it came in the form of his own brother's love life. He immediately tries turning up the volume on his own music while simultaneously tuning Logan out, but unfortunately, he can still hear him. Yeah, I'm doing fine, Logan replies. Get this, Cade's up here with me for the week. Yeah, it's really great. We're going up to Glacier National Park right now. You know, it would have been even better with you up here too. Kaden both looks and feels like he is going to vomit. He mutters, oh my gosh, make it stop! Yeah, I'm sending applications to colleges down by Phoenix, Logan continues. But I don't think I'll be down there until next year. Kaden briefly looks up at his brother. He felt a little bad for him, despite the underlying rivalry he had with him. He just shakes it off, turns away, and tries not to care about it. Hey, I think I'm running out of service, Logan resumes. Just as his phone beeped, Kaden's phone, to his chagrin, also ran out of cell signal. Shoot! They continue driving, but Kaden finally looks up and out at the road. There were stunning mountainscapes filled with lush evergreen on either side of the road. Despite the wondrously amazing view, Logan had a look of melancholy on his face. So what was that about Phoenix? Kaden asks quietly, avoiding eye contact. Oh, Logan responds, now with a look of surprise on his face. It wasn't anything important. Are you trying to move to Phoenix? Kaden presses. I said it wasn't important, alright? Logan snaps before immediately calming down. Sorry, that was... just don't worry about it. Kaden was not only slightly startled by that last comment, but also confused. Logan was acting weird and closed off. No matter. Kaden didn't want to talk anyway. Instead, he leans his head against the window, looks out at the mountains and storm clouds, and drifts off to sleep. Kaden witnesses something weirdly interesting. He was standing, or rather omnisciently present, in an immensely large spherical cave. The curvature of the walls was frosted with ice, and in the center of the generally flat floor was a large and narrow silver pyramid. The tip of the monument stretched nearly to the top of the cavern roof. A glowing blue essence repeatedly pulses up from the base of the pyramid and up towards the top. With each pulse, the metal of the pyramid juts out and follows the blue energy in a wave of metallic particles. The cave appeared to be desolate and completely shut in. That was until Kaden spotted an orange light increasingly expand within one side of the upper wall. Suddenly, the wall began to steam and melt, allowing entrance to whatever was without the wall. Even when the source of the orange heat revealed itself in the newly made opening, Kaden had no idea what it was. It looked humanoid, perhaps even female, but that was the only remotely familiar thing Kaden could pick out. The body of the entity looked to be made of various interlocking pieces of gold, all adding up to look like armor that sat nearly flush with the skin. The headpiece of the entity was especially a sight to see. It resembled that of a Trojan helmet, with the front opening styled as narrow slits that were filled with glowing orange flames. The plumage at the top of the helmet looked like fiery strands of hair that were constantly ablaze. The entity held onto the edge of the opening it had recently made, apparently scanning the seemingly empty room. After realizing the coast was clear, the enclosed gaps between each golden ringlet of the entity's armor slightly retracted, releasing small amounts of flames that presumably allowed it to float safely to the ground. Once the entity was on the ground, its armor returned to its previous state, and it proceeded to step toward the chrome pyramid. It is at this point that Kaden notices the entity has a tall metallic rod strapped to its back. The rod looked modular and technologically advanced, like something straight out of a sci-fi film, with multiple intricately placed parts and a glass orb fastened on the top end. As the entity grew closer to the tall pyramid, it was still tiptoeing and walking slowly. Kaden was unsure as to why this was, because the cave, save it was the golden entity, looked completely vacant. Once the entity was finally in arm's reach of the pyramid, it reached out its hand for the chrome surface, only to find a blurring force field resisting contact. After seemingly resorting to another tactic, the entity unstraps the rod-shaped machine from its back and begins floating to the top, causing short flames to burst out from the narrow crevices of the armor. Just as they were halfway to the top, a ginormous black, ice-covered tortoise jumped out from a burrow hidden nearby. Not only was Kaden caught off guard by the tortoise's appearance, but the golden entity seemed to be as well, especially when the ice-clad reptile shot from its mouth a solid block of ice that catapulted straight into them. The block of ice shattered and almost melted on impact, and the golden entity and their device both dropped to the ground. From what Kaden could see, the entity's flames seemed to darken. The tortoise took advantage of the situation and, like a bull, charged towards its comparatively tiny target. The entity's dying flames soon reignited, and they lifted their head. They clearly noticed the oncoming tortoise and immediately leaped towards the rod and barrel roll beneath the beast. The tortoise screeches to a halt, digging its sharp claws into the icy floor. Just as the golden entity stands up, the tortoise, with its long, ice spike-covered tail, whips them across the cavern and into the wall. The tortoise hurries over once again, but this time begins breathing a stream of icy blue fire on the entity. The flame must have been cold because an icy enclosure began to form around their golden armor. Unfortunately for the tortoise, however, its opponent had another trick up their sleeve. The golden armor of the entity began glowing hot red, and flames began erupting from the crevices. The tortoise began to back away as all of the ice surrounding them hastily melted. As soon as they were free, the entity soared over to the top of the pyramid and slammed the bottom of the device onto the very tip. The tortoise hurries onto the scene, but once the entity twisted the upper and lower halves of the rod in opposite directions, a humongous wave of blue energy shot up the pyramid and into the rod, blowing the tortoise away in the process. The last thing that Kaden saw was the glass orb on the top of the device start to glow blue. After experiencing a riveting flash of multiple images that he could not recall ever seeing before, he saw A girl. She was remarkably beautiful, and unlike anyone Kaden had ever seen before. Her hair was so blonde that it resembled the whitest snow, with it only getting whiter the longer it went. Her skin was a cool beige, but her eyes were the most captivating. They were the bluest eyes he had ever seen, resembling the same shade of blue that trailed up the chrome pyramid. He strangely recognized her, but could not recall ever seeing her before. "Who are you?" Kaden asks in a drunken trance. Her response confuses him. In a chillingly smooth voice, she says, "Help me." Kaden was going to ask further questions, but to his disappointment, he remembers it was all a dream as he suddenly snaps back to reality. He looks around and realizes that the car was no longer on the interstate, but instead parked in a pine tree forest with a cabin standing at the forefront. Kaden glances over at the driver's seat, which is no longer occupied. Then, out of instinct, he turns to look out the window, where Logan is standing. Kaden jumps in his seat as Logan knocks on the window. He sluggishly opens the door. "What the heck, dude?" If you couldn't tell, we made it," Logan replies with a smile. "Come on, sleepyhead. Help me unload the luggage." The words "help me" continuously rung in Kaden's head. He thought back to that strange dream he had. As far as he could remember, he never had a dream like that, let alone one that was as vivid. Ever since that moment, he could not stop thinking about the chrome pyramid and the girl of his dreams.